Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info. London's VAULTS Festival was founded as a one-off event in 2012 by Andy George and Matt Burtcher in the tunnels under Waterloo Station, owned and used for storage by Network Rail. The lockdown due to the COVID pandemic came during the 2020 festival and resulted in the cancellation of the 2021 and 2022 festivals, but the programme has now been announced for a big return in January 2023. I spoke to VAULTS director and co-founder Andy George just before Christmas and asked him, first of all, to try to define what the festival is.
That's a big question. Yes, what is VAULTS Festival? VAULTS Festival in its current format is 8 weeks of up and coming and new theatre, comedy and nightlife from independent artists, often a kind of early career and mid-career artists, creating work that is new both in form, in idea or in voice that's being told. It's a platform, essentially a sort of platform for live performance artists to share work that lots of other venues don't host and don't showcase. And ultimately is a collection of those under one umbrella, giving audiences access to, in my opinion, the most exciting up and coming ideas and work and artists that there are around.
Right. And how is it curated? Is it a curated festival or is it more open?
Yeah, it is. So it's I think this is based on much, but I think we're the largest curated arts festival in the UK, if not Europe. So yes, we are curated. A lot of our programming is done through applications, and we have 5 criteria that we're looking for when we assess those applications. We're looking for concept and form. Is it interesting? Is it exploring new ideas or new forms or ways of expressing theatre? Is it? We look at representation. Are the artists involved representative? Are they? Is it a voice that we haven't heard? Been not heard much on stage previously. We look at is there an audience for it? Do we feel like there's a way of connecting audiences to it? We look at opportunity. What's the opportunity for the artists and is it useful for them as a platform to grow and develop? And then we also look at kind of quality. Who's involved and is there a glimmer that we think it might be of high quality as well. So those are kind of the 5 criteria we kind of assess the shows on, and we have sort of settled on those over the years because we feel it kind of it creates a program that is both innovative but also representative, but also kind of looking at how do we make sure that the VAULTS Festival is serving the artists it should do, which is those people who haven't got that aren't fully established in their careers yet and are still kind of forming at the formative stages of their careers. So that's kind of how we program it, and that then sort of triggers a gigantic jigsaw puzzle of slotting all those shows into the program and into the venues that we create. And we'll end up this year, I think we'll end up with about 550 shows in total. So it's a sizable jigsaw, and definitely kind of bigger than when we first started. But yeah, it's a good jigsaw. It's a good problem to have in terms of trying to fit all those shows in.
Yeah, I assume that most of those shows you won't get to see. So how do you judge whether they fit your criteria? Is it just an application form? Or
so many shows are created for either for VAULTS Festival or VAULTS Festival is their kind of first full outing. So most of the time we're judging on a piece of paper, and I think that's where, first of all, we've tried to be as inclusive as possible, so people can submit via written application, but they can also submit via audio application or a video application as well. And actually, I really enjoy the video applications because it sort of really gets, you can sort of see people's eyes come alive when they're talking about it. But yeah, ultimately it comes down to us trying to imagine it and trying to sort of get, we've created and crafted the application form over the years to sort of try and give us the best impression and give people the best opportunity to tell us what it is and sort of plain English. So we can kind of get a sense of it and kind of imagine it and picture it and like how it might be. And try and form a rounded opinion of it based on who's involved, what people have done before, what ideas they're exploring, who they're working with, what their plans, ambitions are. We don't always get it right. I don't think there's necessarily an objective right or wrong, but we feel kind of comfortable that the process is fair. Every application is read by at least 2, if not 3 people. And, we're kind of objectively, there's obviously subjectivity integral in any sort of form of curation, but those 5 markers I talked about earlier make sure that we're kind of at least being fair in our subjectivity rather than unfair.
Yeah. And that's a lot of forms for you all to read. I mean, 500 and odd, and no doubt a lot more that were turned down. It's
great. Again, it's a good problem to have. Like, we this year I think we received about 1,000 applications, I think, and it's one of those kind of it's a really challenging task, kind of processing them all, but also is such a privileged position to sort of be able to actually see these ideas that people are having, and often in the stages where these shows don't exist, and trying to kind of find ways that they can articulate an idea on a piece of paper. So it's a really kind of you get a real insight into people's minds and into their creative process. It's also really interesting sometimes reading back at old applications for shows that kind of then happened, and they're going, actually, it changed quite a lot, or like, actually, that's spot on, and sort of seeing how shows kind of develop and progress. Some people are natural salesmen. Some people are great at selling an idea. Other people struggle with that, and they may have a great idea, but it's hard to communicate. And applications in themselves are tricky for some people. That's why we kind of have that open way of different ways people can apply or communicate a show with us. But ultimately, it also means that we can be accessible to anyone. Anyone can apply. There's no cost to apply, and it means that we can, anyone can throw their hat in the ring, and you don't have to have a previous relationship with anyone to kind of be considered to be programmed.
Yeah, I suppose it's like auditioning actors. Some actors are good at auditions, but don't get much better with the performance, and some are really good actors who are not very good at auditions. So I suppose you've got the same barriers that you're trying to break through, haven't you? Absolutely,
and the barriers is a great word, because that's a lot of our processes all throughout is just trying to remove barriers and trying to kind of make it as easy as possible to get in, and then once you're in the program, also kind of remove financial barriers and other things that can prevent people, especially sort of people that have been historically shut out from the arts and theatre, enable them to actually do it and be included.
What are the most common reasons why you would turn something down from an application?
Often it might be, it just doesn't, sometimes it's just that it doesn't fit with our structure. Our structure is about shows that are, 60 to 90 minutes long and can kind of come in and out on a in shortish turnarounds, 20 minutes to an hour turnarounds. So sometimes it's just that what they're looking for isn't what we are and what we can provide. And I think that's really kind of important. We always have a kind of mindset of, if you have to compromise your show too much to fit into our structure, we're probably not the right place for you. And there's plenty of other places that are doing, that can do that much better than we can. So that's kind of quite a common reason. I think another reason comes down to, it's that articulation. We in our application form, we specifically kind of we ask people what their idea is, but also then what the format is, but also then what their marketing copy is. And we kind of deliberately sort of split those three things out, because it's quite easy, it's quite easy for those things to become one answer. Yeah. And they end up, they end up giving us their marketing spiel. It's like, but we don't know what this show actually is. What is it? How does it actually translate onto stage? Because we need to know that in order to know which space it might suit, or how it might fit in within the overall program. So I think that's another step that I think people often can fall a little bit short on. It's just sort of really kind of going, okay, when we want to know about the concept, we want to know about the ideas. When the format is okay, what's it that, how is it presented on stage? It's three people and they're performing monologues, and there's a bar on the upstage wall, something like that. And then the marketing copy is how you're going to sell it to your audience and how you're going to make it attractive. So distinctly thinking about in those three answers means that people can give a really rounded opinion, a view of what their show is. But I think that's often where people kind of mix those up too much, or they become too homogenous of, with effectively the same answer for each one. We just can't get a good enough idea of it to be able to sort of feel confident in it.
Yeah. So you have different types of performance spaces there. What are they? What are the different types of spaces you've got?
Yeah. So we create all of our performance spaces from scratch. So and in the design and the creation of those spaces, try and kind of create different environments that suit both the venue, the rooms that they are in, and sort of work with the conditions of the rooms, but also that create spaces that are intimate. I think is an ultimate objective of mine when I'm sort of creating spaces. If I take the Cage venue, for example, it's a capacity of 99, but it's a sort of a long kind of elongated thrust, so it's sort of on three sides. And so your audiences are only ever the audience is 3 rows deep. So even with a sort of capacity of about 100 people, you're only ever 3 rows from the actor. And there's something about that intimacy and the closeness that I think theatre, the fringe level theatre really brings you that West End and sort of larger venues don't quite. And that's kind of really what I crave when I attend shows is that real connection with the actor and the performer. So intimacy is a real big kind of driver as to kind of how we kind of go about kind of creating and designing the venues. But also we can try and create venues that are flexible. Like we have a couple of spaces, the pit and the cavern, where they can be performed in traverse or in the round or in thrust or in kind of different configurations. And it's kind of creating, artists creating work at a kind of fringe and at a level don't often get to experiment with those different layouts and different forms because you're normally in the studio space, which is an end on rake and, blah, blah, blah. And actually giving people the space to try different formations, different configurations and manipulating the audience in different ways, I think is really important. And I think it's a really important part of development. Like any performance, any show is a relationship between the audience and the performer. And the way that contract is created is by the way you're sat and the way you're interacting with the other people around you and the performers. So the venues that we create are trying to complement the shows that we have and trying to kind of add to them and not detract from them, not to the point where, the venue is overbearing on the shows, but hopefully kind of creates an environment and a setting that actually allows for the shows to be heightened than anything else.
This festival started in 2012. So how did it actually start?
It started out of a desire. We knew a bunch of people, artists, theatre makers that were making work, but were really struggling as sort of relatively recent graduates to kind of be able to put that work on, particularly because they were making work that might be, a bit more site specific or a bit more kind of outside the normal box, but also, in terms of, presenting ideas and forms that were a bit risky in some other venues' eyes. So the idea kind of came from, okay, if we can bunch all these people together and put them under one umbrella of a festival, first of all, we can kind of share the cost of putting it on and making it more affordable, but we can also then amplify the volume of which those shows make and the splash that they make. So it's all about kind of creating a playground that enabled people that had work that they were ready to perform but couldn't find a place to do it, to be able to share their work with an audience and sort of attract an audience by the noise that we can create collectively. And ultimately that essence is almost still the same today as it was at the beginning. Obviously we've changed and we've grown a lot since then, but the idea at the heart of it, about being an affordable collective place that people can come and share ideas and connect with an audience and try new work on a deal that's not going to break their bank if it goes tits up, but also that they can do well out of it if it does go well.
Yeah.
All of that kind of is about comes back to that the ethos of where it first started from of creating that playground where people can experiment and try it, but whilst also being in the heart of London. You're not out in the sticks somewhere. You're in a place where there's audiences all around you. There's people, people coming, and it's easy to get to, and you can attract an audience more easily than maybe if you were somewhere else.
Yeah. Can you remember walking into that space for the first time and thinking this could hold a theatre festival? Well, when we first moved in, sort of first occupied the tunnels, they were still being used as a paper record store for Network Rail. So kind of boxes and boxes and boxes of old paper records. And so the first opinion was probably, what are we going to do with all these boxes? But the first festival was very sort of DIY. We didn't know what we were doing, so it was very much tipping over like filing cabinets on their sides for seats, and a big bucket of Budweiser beers with ice in it. That was our bar. It was all as DIY as you could probably imagine. And and it was such. We spent so much time on that first festival in the run up to it, being like, what if no one comes? To the point that when people did come, we were like, oh, people are coming. What now? What do we do? Yeah.
And we ended up with I think it was about 7,000 audience members for that first festival, which was effectively sort of 3 long weekends, like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I think we did Sundays as well, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And yes, so 7,000 people, and it was exhausting, and it was knackering, and it was we were just getting through it in a way that in survival mode of like, okay, but it was also exhilarating at the same time, and we got to the end of it, and the thought never even crossed our mind to think about doing it again. It was like, okay, absolutely not. It was crazy, but great, that's done. And then during that year, people just sort of kept being like, "Are you going to do it again?" Like, I'd love to bring a show. And so that's when, we didn't do a festival in 2013, but we did. The next one was in 2014, and it was bigger and kind of, developed and such sort of developed. And it's spurned from, okay, actually there's a desire and a need and a hunger from the artists to actually have this platform. And we almost sort of felt responsibility that we kind of needed to carry it on. There was a sort of sense of service that actually, if we stop this, then we've potentially got a solution to a lot of people. And actually, if we don't carry on, then we're depriving those people of that opportunity. So yeah, so since 2014, it's sort of just it's grown and grown and grown, and now is, I think, something like 1,000% the size of what it was when we first started it, but still with that same ethos and essence of how do we create that playground that removes those barriers and allows people to perform and create in a space that is exciting but also conducive of creativity.
Yeah. Is there still a small part of you that misses that DIY attitude? Because there is something appealing about that, isn't there?
I mean, it'd be simpler, but it's the thing. Like, the more you do it, the more then people's like. There's a whole generation of artists that know it as it is now.
Yeah,
and their expectations of it are up here, whereas they're rightly so kind of expect much more from us than when we first started, and they don't know what they don't know, like, that's where it came from. But that's also great. The fact is they see us as this, almost as an institution, and if anything, it sort of feels like we're so far from that. We are some people just trying to make it work in the best way possible. But yes, it does your question. I would love to just tip over some filing cabinets and get a box of Budweiser, and it would certainly be simpler. But yeah, I'm not sure.
There's no going back.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, who are your audiences? Are they regular theatre goers or tourists or a mixture?
It's a really good question. We tend to attract quite a big audience that aren't ordinary theatre goers. In the audience find they're low cultural attenders in terms of they might go to the theatre sort of once or twice a year. And so, but I think what Vault Festival is for those people is a gateway. It's a place that you can feel completely comfortable in. You don't feel like you have to dress up to go to the theatre, and the ticket prices are affordable. You can take a punt on a show and spend £6 and have a great night out. And so, I think for those people, it's a chance to see some stuff and sort of feel like they're involved in a movement of arts and performance that, spending £60 on a ticket in the West End or more, like, doesn't quite give you that same sort of feeling of escapism and sort of discovery that you might get at Vault Festival. So there's a big chunk of those people. We also have a big chunk of artists and people working within the arts industry who kind of see what is happening at Vault Festival as the birthplace of shows and ideas, and it's a real chance to see what is going to be the next big thing, or the next big artist, or even even to kind of connect with artists. A lot of I often say to a lot of our artists that their show is one thing, but also sometimes it's the conversations that happen in the bar that actually are even more important than the actual show itself. Sometimes, like, it's those conversations that lead to collaborations, or they lead to partnerships or friendships, or things. So much blossoms out of those interactions, casual interactions. So yeah, so our audience is a bit of a mixture. We're kind of working this year to try and develop our particular sort of domestic tourism audience. The people that might live out in the home counties or the surrounding kind of commutable areas to London, and see if we can kind of try and elicit more of those people. But like, interestingly, I think I was looking at the data the other day. I think 41% of our audience live outside of London. which has surprised me because I sort of thought that we might be more sort of London centric than that. But actually, it sort of speaks to the fact that actually people are sort of seeing it as a destination and seeing it as a place that they can go and spend the day and see 2 or 3 shows, or book a hotel and do a whole weekend, and seeing it as a sort of destination that they can as an excuse to come to London and plot some other things around it and have a kind of, make a kind of cap off a weekend with a nice show. So yeah, so it's an audience that's changing and evolving every year, and we obviously haven't run the festival since 2020, so it'd be interesting to see who the audience are now. But they tend to also be a bit younger. They are younger than maybe a normal theatre audience. So between 25 to sort of 45 and 55 are kind of our main brackets of audience. So it means but also my mum comes every week, and I think it's really nice that actually it's a space that you can feel comfortable no matter what age you are, no matter who you are, you always feel like you're welcome. And fundamentally, I think that's kind of what we always try and protect, is that feeling of you don't have to be a cool kid to be here, but you also don't have to be be wealthy to be here. Everyone can be here and everyone can enjoy it in whichever way they want.
Yeah, it sounds like the sort of atmosphere that you used to get on the Edinburgh Fringe, which isn't quite the same anymore because you can't take the same chances when the ticket prices are what they've got to, and the hotel prices, and even the artists are being priced out now. So
absolutely, I wasn't able to go to the Edinburgh Fringe this year because I couldn't afford the accommodation, and I think it's a sort of secondary issue that I think the Edinburgh Fringe is. No one's really taking responsibility for it because everyone's sort of slightly removed from the actual, from the sharp end of it. But yeah, that's something that, in terms of atmosphere, exactly that. It's sort of trying to keep, and it's, the Edinburgh Fringe have, I think, what was it there? I can't remember what it was this year. It was a big milestone.
70,
was it 70? Yeah, might well be. So they've got a lot more years than us, but I think what we are also aware of is sort of not going down the same pathway where we end up in the same place. And so for us, it's about making sure we're not just growing and growing and growing and growing. We want, this year we're actually slightly smaller than when we were in 2020, sort of deliberately so that we don't necessarily want to get bigger and bigger and bigger. We need things to be sustainable and provide as many opportunities as we can. But we know that exponential growth just leads to cannibalization of your own program, and it leads to those kind of situations where if an artist has a bigger budget, they can buy more advertising. It creates 2-tier systems very quickly. It creates creates an ecosystem that's just eating itself. So we're very conscious of that, and we want to sort of keep trying to make it better and better for the artists and for our audiences. And we know that exponential growth is not the answer to that.
Yeah. You mentioned 2020 when the world changed, and the world actually changed right in the middle of your festival, didn't it? And this is the first festival you've actually managed to put on since then. So what's been happening with Vault since 2020?
Wow. Yes. What's been happening? Well, 2020, like I say, the pandemic reared its head. It started around kind of week 5 of the festival, and it ended up with us having to cancel the final week entirely. So part of the first stages of that was just recovery and trying to make sure that we and our artists and our staff were all okay, and that we kind of we knew that at that stage I definitely thought we were in a 3 months in and out, and so we started kind of looking, okay, our best route for recovery is to just try and get back on our feet and sort of plan for 2021. Got to about June of 2020, and we were kind of, we were looking ahead at the festival in 2021, and we just knew we needed to start listening to the scientists more than maybe the government was at the time. And the scientists were all saying there's going to be a second wave, there's going to be maybe a third wave, it's going to spike again. And so we made the sort of early decision to say, actually, we're not going to do 2021. We're going to postpone it to 2022. And we wanted to be wrong. We wanted to be out of lockdown and be happy and rally by that point. But unfortunately, we were very much correct on that one. And so instead, we kind of started to think about, okay, how we've got a little bit of time now. How do we go about making Vault Festival planting some foundations. We've always just been a freelance team, myself and Matt and our colleague Tim, just sort of doing it on the side, trying to kind of make it work. And we kind of thought, okay, let's use this as a bit of an opportunity to try and lay some foundations. So we created a charitable body, which is Vault Creative Arts. And we've transferred the sort of running a Vault Festival from our previous company to Heritage Arts Company to Vault Creative Arts. We've now got we've got a board of trustees who are governing that, and we're kind of creating a kind of year-round program of creative activities and opportunities to sort of go alongside Vault Festival and a few other kind of festivals that are in the works. So we also now have a team of employees, which is something we've never had before. So we've sort of been able to bring people in, and we were very fortunate to receive cultural recovery funding, which we would not be here without, and also some support from Lambeth Council as well through their Economic Resilience Fund. And yeah, like I say, I can't understate how much we would have packed in 2020 if we weren't able to receive that. So whilst we don't get regular funding from Arts Council or even project grant funding, we wouldn't be here without the CRF. So where we are now, well, skipping over a little bit, which is the 2022 festivals, we started kind of setting our eyes on 2022, and 2021 was a weird year, wasn't it? It was. It was. 2022 was hard. No, sorry, 2020 was hard, but there was a bit of novelty about it. There was a bit of 2021 was just relentless. Yeah. I think the kind of stop start, the kind of can we, can't we, the trying to predict it, and then so we were so close to getting to 2022's festival. Omicron came along and sort of started diverting, getting around all the vaccinations and things that we had that felt like they were the thing that was protecting us. And we had people isolating left, right, and centre. And we got to the 11th hour, and unfortunately, we had to make the decision to cancel. And it was awful. It was heartbreaking. It was, to have been working on it for 18 months, if not longer, and to get so close to it. But ultimately, it came down to assessing that, we have 600 shows, 550 WOD shows. Like, if 25% of those will probably have to cancel due to someone having to isolate. If that's 125 shows cancelling, that's like, our team are going to have to be isolating because they're going to be, getting hit left, right, and centre. Like, we're going to have more work to do and artists are going to be losing money on having to cancel. Our team will be depleted and having to deal with 125 show cancellations. Like, it just starts to become a real hot mess and a melting pot of misery. Like, festivals, and especially Vault Festival, are very much about joy and about celebration. And if we had gone ahead, it would have been backs against the wall, kind of fighting, that fighting mentality of just trying to get through it, like firefighting all the way through. Yeah. I remember the last 3 weeks of Vault Festival 2020, and they were horrific. And that was through no one's fault, but just like the uncertainty and that kind of that feeling of always just fighting fires was awful. And I knew that to put our artists and staff through that would have broken me. It would have broken everyone. It would have just been too much. So we didn't do 2022's festival, and ultimately came out of it. Took some time to look at what we did what we call a reimagination process, and we looked at what the festival is, what it means to people, how it can develop and grow. And we sort of did some round tables and surveys, and took some time to really assess what the future of it looks like. And actually that's sort of been so helpful and informative, of the direction it's kind of going to be traveling in the next, next year, but also the next 5 years. And ultimately, then sort of started to, lay plans and groundworks for 2023. And I think, the other thing I would say as well, we also, during that time, we opened a new little cafe, bar and creative space in Waterloo. So it's the first time we've ever had a sort of permanent home as such. But also gives us a little space to host, sharings and comedy nights or play readings or, other things. And it's just really nice. It's really nice to be able to have a place that we belong. And, we've always been a sort of nomadic organization often, our office is always like in the tower block that's about to be demolished, or in the library that's got holes in it, so therefore no one else like we've just been moving around from desolate building to another building to have a place that we can call home, even if it's a small place, is beautiful. So I think that's where we're at now. We're sort of gunning for 2023 and very much on the horizon.
Well, it's a promising sign that from not knowing if you'll be able to continue, you're now thinking 5 years ahead. So that sounds promising.
Yes, yeah. Well, exactly that. And I think it's the difference between where we were in 2020, which is always just sort of looking, always just sort of. My mum always talks about the scene in Wallace and Gromit where the train is going along the track and putting the track down. Always felt like that, which I think is probably a metaphor for the arts in general.
Yeah.
But to be able to just have that little bit of time to actually think, okay, how do we make sure this thing is still going in 10 years' time? Yeah. Is ultimately kind of one of my biggest jobs at the moment is to put those foundations and enables it to still be there.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember interviewing the chief executive of one of the theatres in Greater Manchester in 2020, and he was saying that they were having meetings every day because everything was changing every day, wasn't it? The guidelines were changing literally every day. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was. I think that's one of those things in 2020, in that March period of 2020, was people look to us, our artists, our audiences look to us to know what's going on, and we were trying to educate ourselves as much as possible with guidance from the powers that be. But when they don't know the answers, and therefore you don't know the answers, it's you're in a position that you're ultimately powerless, but also you need to both be the decision makers as well as the recipients of information. And being that kind of middleman between those two is very tricky in that situation.
Yeah, especially when the government claimed it didn't know it was breaching its own guidelines.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's another story.
I remember like every day I was updating our COVID policy, end of February kind of onwards. And there was a time I was, often it'd be like the current government guidelines, and there was a time I caught myself and was like, hang on a second, I've just remembered who our government is. Like, oh no.
So this year then, I know it's difficult when you're heading a festival to pick out highlights or anything with them, if you're frightened of upsetting anybody, but what have we got for next year's festival?
Absolutely. I mean, so in the sort of macro level of it, we've got about 550 shows. We've got new theatre, so theatre across sort of devised work, new writing, physical theatre, bit of dance and circus. We've then got an amazing comedy programme, brand new comedians, but also established comedians sort of doing new material. And then we've also got the nightlife programme as well, which is taking place in our venue called the Fairground, and is all about kind of cabaret, drag, burlesque, circus and performance art and all things kind of weird and wonderful. But if I was going to pick out a couple of highlights, I'm really looking forward to seeing You Are Going to Die, which is Adam Scott Rowley. Adam this is not culturally significant a number of years ago, and it was one of the most memorable, stunning performances, I think, from an individual person performance level, mesmerizing. And this is sort of billed as a bit of a sequel to that. So I'm sort of really looking forward to seeing that. I'm also looking forward to seeing The Long Run, which is Katie Arnstein. Katie sort of did her first show with us, I think probably about 5 years ago, which was Bicycles and Fish. And she's now since done a trilogy of shows. And this is now sort of the next show. And so it's been really lovely sort of seeing her development and her growth across that kind of trajectory to sort of, into a fully fledged, competent theatre maker who's sort of making wonderful feminist new writing pieces as well. And then my sort of final pick would be Good Grief, which is coming to us from our partners in home in Manchester. So they are sort of physical comedy around kind of creating, I think it's like making your own funeral, the characters sort of making their own funeral. So I think those are sort of my the three highlights out of the sort of theatre programme that I'm kind of mostly looking forward to. But there are, as you said in the question, there's so much to choose from, and we are genuinely proud of every single show that's in the program, and every show has got a reason why it's there. Whether that's because we think the artist is telling something new, or whether they've got a new idea, or whether they are an interesting artist in their own right, and we want to support them and platform them. There's always a reason why every show is in there, and I think that it creates a program that means that there's, some shows will be fantastic, some shows will need a bit more work, but there's always a reason why they're there in the first place.
That was Andy George, director and co-founder of VAULTS Festival, which takes place in various venues around Waterloo, London, from the 24th of January to the 19th of March 2023, featuring more than 500 theatre, comedy, cabaret and late-night shows. For more information and to book tickets for events, see vaultfestival.com. You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.